What you are about to watch is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute any type of advice. Always question the validity of what you see and what you hear. Viewer discretion is advised.
So you want to become a better tyrant? You've come to the right place, but before we get into all the good stuff, the manipulation, bribes, population control, and all the exciting projects that all successful tyrants engage into, you must first take a bit of a history lesson. What? You thought because you were a tyrant, you can ignore history and jump into all the good stuff? Hold your horses, be patient, and let's learn. The reason why those you will get to control will hopefully remain there is that they don't learn from history. So take a different approach. Let's learn and analyze what history has shared with us. We could go back pretty far. We could talk about cave times and the awakening of man to the power of tribes, war, and population control. Ever since humans have had a taste of realization of power, things have taken a very significant turn. Today, we'll go over the history of the Greek and Roman Empire. What went right, what went wrong, and what you need to learn from the overall lesson. The Greek Empire had a very successful history, powerful culture, interesting religious system, and significant and successful political system. For the looks of them, they thought they were going to be around forever, but we all know how it turned out. We can start out at around year 2000 before Common Era. The first settlers began to settle in Greece. By year 1600 before Common Era, the Bronze Age of Greece had begun as the Mycenaean people took their name from the capital city of their land, Mycenae. Their history is not without war. In the year 1194 before Common Era, the Trojan War between the Greeks and the Trojans began. Then by the year 1100 before Common Era, Mycenaean Greece was invaded by Dorian tribes from up north. The Dorians were wielding iron weapons used to defeat and conquer the Mycenaeans. In the year 850 before Common Era, the Greek alphabet was developed from the Phoenician alphabet. In the year 800 before Common Era, Homer documented the Odyssey, making reference to the Trojan War with King Odysseus as the main character. Then in the year 776 before Common Era, the first recorded Olympic Games took place, which was of course held at Olympia. In the year 743 before Common Era, the disagreement that led Mycenae going into war against the Spartans had already started. Then in 504 before Common Era, democracy was born in Athens. Then in the year 495 before Common Era, the philosopher-mathematician Pythagoras made an appearance in the world. In the year 490 before Common Era, the First Persian War began, where Persia invaded Athens to get even with them for Greek raiding Persia previously. Then in the year 480 before Common Era, the Second Persian War began with Persia's king Cyrus invading Greece. You can tell that there was bad blood developing there. In the year 432 before Common Era, the Parthenon was finally completed. What does that mean? It means that the temple was built in Athens. That's where the goddess Athena was placed so that she could watch over the city. Pay attention here. And in the year 404 before Common Era, Athens lost the Peloponnesian Wars to the Spartans. The Spartans were powerful warriors as seen in the movie 300. In the year 399 before Common Era, Socrates, the founder of philosophy, made an appearance in this world. Then in the year 380 before Common Era, Plato, who was a student of Socrates, founded the academy in Athens. This was an era of enlightenment for Greece. In the year 339 before Common Era, the catapult was invented at Syracuse. It was a great piece of war addition for the time being. In the year 336 before Common Era, Philip II, king of Macedon, was assassinated, leaving Alexander the Great as the new king. In the year 333 before Common Era, Alexander conquered the Persians and declared himself as their new king. In 331 before Common Era, Alexander conquered Egypt and turned Babylon into the capital of its new conquered land. In the year 322, it was the rise of Aristotle, who was an avid practitioner of philosophy, mathematics, a former student of Plato. In the year 265 before Common Era, it was the rise of Euclid, who invented geometry. Then in the year 212 before Common Era, it was the rise of Archimedes, who invented mathematical engineering. In the year 146 before Common Era, Romans defeated the Greeks in Corinth, and the Greek Empire was absorbed by the Roman Empire. And the Romans absorbed their knowledge, sports, fighting strategies, and the most prevalent portions of their culture. This was the end of one of the most powerful and significant empires in history. You see, the Greeks were a great empire with a high level of intelligence. They were extremely proficient in math and science. Without them, we would not have advanced so much in mathematics. They even realized that the sun is at the center of the solar system. They were the first civilization to have established a medical school based on science. They also had some solid observations in biology, art, literature, and drama. They had a very rich life, They also made significant advancements in sculpting, pottery, and architecture. The four themes of their architectural design were based on simplicity, proportion, perspective, and harmony. They went as far as to influence Rome on their later architectural designs. The Romans took their knowledge as their foundation, which even influenced the West from the Renaissance and even today. As we stated previously, they built monuments for gods like Zeus and Acropolis, as well as temples, theaters, and stadia. Their pillars were incredible looking. The Greeks weren't superstitious people who blindly believed in strange religions or magical thinking. They were very smart and involving comedy and drama plays. They enjoyed and understood entertainment very well. They also enjoyed mythical literature, which will be the equivalent of reading a novel. The religion was more used for shaping children's moral behavior rather than following blindly some fantasy. Their language has a rich history as well. It morphed with Latin and then formed a new version of modern Greek. The culture, education, and knowledge was later shared with Germany, England, Spain, France, and the Americas as they spread, and morphing of the Roman Empire into Catholic Empire took place. We'll talk about that next because it is important for you to know, since the Greek Empire was powerful, so the Romans must have had something over them to have that victory, and they must have known that the Greek knowledge was powerful and worth absorbing. You see, the Romans weren't just any empire. They were one of the greatest empires in history. They spanned from across Europe all the way to North Africa. They were very influential. The empire began in the city of Rome, Italy, and later grew to conquer Africa, Europe, and later Asia. It was originally founded in the year 17 before Common Era, and then Caesar Augustus was their first emperor in the year 31 before Common Era. The empire lasted all the way to the year of its fall in the year 476 after Common Era. It was at the peak of its power between the year 3 and 5 before Common Era. They had very advanced architecture and public health systems. They were into wealth building and politics. Augustus successfully established the future successors to the dynasty, which were Tiberius, who ruled from the year 14 to 27, Caligula, who ruled from the year 37 to 41, Claudius, who ruled from the year 41 to 54, and Nero, who ruled from the year 54 and 68. We won't go through it, but the empire had 70 Roman emperors in total. They also came up with the days of the week and the months. They were mostly planetary god names. It is our current calendar system. It is the Greco-Roman calendar. The advantage that the Romans had is that they had an incredibly well-organized army. Their weapons and armors were more advanced than that of their opponents and were well trained to go to war. This is why they managed to defeat the Greeks. The armies were split into legions of about 5,000 men made of 10 cohorts. The breakdown was a tent, which was composed of 8 men, a century, which was composed of 10 tents, in turn a cohort, which was 6 centuries of 480 men total. A legion was composed of 10 cohorts, which was 5,000 men total. During their first 3 centuries of their ruleship, they had about 25 to 34 legions. That was a big, powerful army. Romans were religious warriors who attributed their victories and expansion of their power to their relationship with their gods. They were dedicated to prayer as much as they were dedicated to war. In 380, Christianity became the official religion of Rome. They entertained themselves with gladiator fights, which were slaves and criminals trained to become professional warriors for entertainment. The gladiators fight to death and used real weapons to engage in combat to entertain the masses. Most gladiators would end up dead, but those few who survived long enough to be freed lived normal lives after their freedom, and those most successful became celebrities of their times. The term gladiator comes from the Latin gladius, which means sword. Romans also had some significant inventions such as the straight roads and the central heating. The straight roads expanded to about 55,000 when they were invented. They built them so well that we shape modern roads after that invention. It allowed them to travel fast and dodge potential robbers. The central heating is what inspired our modern heating equipment. Theirs was underfloor heating system called a hypocaust, which warmed floors and walls in a building. Another powerful Roman invention was the aqueducts in the form of network pipes, such as channels and bridges to transport water to different areas. Their structures can still be seen today, so you bet they built them well. Romans had a very advanced idea of the link between dirt and disease, so they appreciated the idea of clean water. They also invented concrete through the mix of volcanic ash, lime, and seawater in order to build the strong buildings. This is why their buildings are still standing after more than 1500 years of the empire coming to an end. Besides the beautiful and strong structural architecture, they also brought journalism to the world. Romans invented the first newspaper called the Acta Diurna, which translates to daily acts. That was around the year 131 before Common Era. They weren't exactly papers, but rather carved metals or stones available in public places for people to read. The Greco-Roman calendar that they brought to the world, which is known as the Julian calendar, which we use right now, which is based in 12 months that contain names of Roman gods and rulers. The practice of taking consensus and keeping track of their citizens also came from the Roman. They also came up with the classic Roman numerals, which we use and we often commonly see in cheesy horror movies from the 80s and 90s to enumerate their chapters. This was a very significant and powerful empire, so why on earth did they fail? It's a very important lesson, so take notes. Their decline began around year 200 after Common Era, after 500 years of ruling and conquering. There were several reasons why the decline happened. The rulers and politicians became more and more corrupt, so this led to civil wars within the empire itself, and then when barbarian tribes such as the Huns attacked them, they were not able to defend their territory for too long. In 1476, Romulus Augustulus, which became the last emperor, was forced to give up his position to Germanic barbarian Odoacer, who became the new king of Italy. When that happened, the poor people who were paying high taxes and had difficulties owning private property were actually glad to see the Roman Empire fail. This may start to sound somewhat familiar by now, so you may ask, what's with all the history lessons? There are three main concepts that I want you to understand here. The first concept is the fact that both empires started from the barter system, where people will trade goods for goods, later moving to assigning value to gold and silver metal coins to establish a monetary and bank system, and later created a massive molding of cheap metal coins with images that represented gods and rulers in order to establish value. This sort of equates to the printing of money that is happening in modern society. Both empires established level of tyrannical leadership that as time went on, more power was concentrated and therefore the leaders became more tyrannical and exploited those on the bottom to become richer and more powerful. This equates to the modern notion of the rich becoming richer and the poor becoming poorer. Also, the tyranny eventually became a contributor to the downfall of the empires. You see, tyrannical forces that don't know when to stop eventually lead to failure. I know you might not care all that much, but trust me, there is much power in prolonging the failure of an empire. At least until you serve your term and gather enough money to leave the empire before it completely collapses. The third lesson is the most important and reinforces the main point. All empires eventually fail. The Roman Empire is not the first nation or civilization to fail, and it will not be the last. Look, for example, the Chinese Empire, the Aztec civilization, the Mayan civilization, the Roman Catholic Empire that preceded the Roman Empire, Venezuela, and now Ecuador, which is at the brink of that failure. If there is something that you can take from this main lesson is to understand that the huge potential for failure and collapse exists. It is a house of cards, and let me explain you the very reason why these empires are a house of cards destined to fail. Going back to the first concept, the transition from coin made from precious metal to a symbolic coin made out of materials that don't hold much value. In our case, the constant printing of money, the constant bailout of corrupt banks, that you need to distribute the money and ensure that you and your colleagues get properties and tangible goods in exchange for your monopoly money cannot go on forever. Raising taxes, scamming students by letting them borrow this virtual money to get education, and forcing people to pay much higher prices in buying homes cannot go on forever. The great majority of the new generation are already renting at a very high cost, and some are starting to become homeless. This is an indicator that the potential collapse is already beginning. Knowing this is helpful to you so that you can strategize your chance of becoming wealthy and powerful while you still can. You have seen what people can do when they riot against injustices. The last thing you want is to get caught up and blamed by an angry mob. And don't let them find out that most of your power is just perceptual, because if they realize that the emperor is naked, it will be game over. If they realize that people shouldn't be afraid of government, but the government should be afraid of the people, you'll be screwed. Going back to the second point, which is that corruption is going to lead to the downfall of any and all empires. Look, for example, China. They have gone too far for too long with the abusive credit social system. North Korea has kept the grip for too long. It has gone so far that their people are starting to form some sort of community power. That is dangerous for the ruler, and one day he might just not be the ruler anymore. Mexico's government was using cartels as the distractions against their public, and they move into using them as puppets to bend to their will. Now, things are turning against the tyrannical government, and these drug cartels are taking over government and designating who their future leaders will become. Venezuela, once very prosperous, has now been ruined by the economical greed of corruption to the point where conditions are deplorable. Where once were very well off and people had no desire to come to the United States because they had it so well. After so many years of prosperity, Ecuador is now failing too in the hands of powerful foreign drug cartels. The news and traditional schools fail to teach you that nothing has changed from the onset of humanity. We may have become more diplomatic and start to use policy as an excuse to conquer other nations through debt and war, but that is just to prove that the barbaric way to invade and conquer is not as obvious as it has been in history, but is still there. The winner conquers all and takes all. Where one nation or empire collapses is an opportunity for a tyrant to take over the ruler. Just make sure that the empire that falls apart is not yours during your time in the office, because those who once worshipped you will hate you. Your allies will become your enemies and will let you fend for yourself while they gather whatever they can so that they can take off without you and leave you to deal with the angry mobs pointing fingers at you. If you manage to survive the angry mobs, you will have other tyrants who were waiting for their turn to rule, hating you because now they can't rule because you mishandled the situation. Even though you and I know that this will not totally be your fault, others don't care. They will stick you with a bill that you will not be able to pay. This is why you need to understand the signs of a falling empire. If you've been paying attention to what I've been sharing with you, you should know that the failure of the empire has already begun. What you need to know is how to tell when the collapse is nearing its approach. There are 3 signs that you can follow. 1 is your monopoly money collapsing and collectively moving into pure digital. 2 is when more than 60% of the population rents. And 3 is when disagreements are so high among your own people that threats of civil war is at the verge. If you look at what's currently going on, you can probably tell that we are not too far from that. Your job is to have strong ties with the banks, allow them to freely do their transactions, but have them exchange your monetary assets into properties and other physical assets. Everything else is inevitable. Perhaps having a property outside of your country is a good escape route. This is it for today. Stay tuned for your next lesson.